The postseason is drawing near. What are some storylines we should be looking for when it comes to your San Antonio Spurs? Welcome back to Spurs In Focus right here on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, even on Amazon Podcasts. We are everywhere. You want to go subscribe ASAP. And don't forget about the Substack. It is completely free. Our guest is buying free subscriptions. It's in by 100 subscriptions right now. All you got to do is click subscribe, and he's got your back. So make sure you do that in just a few minutes once we're done here on Spurs In Focus. By the way, my name is Jeff Garcia, longtime Spurs writer in San Antonio. What are we talking about today? We're going to get into all the nitty-gritty later this week. We're a long way before the Spurs game 1 starts, right? But today we're just looking at an overall generic overview of some storylines that we need to be keeping an eye on with this postseason drawing near. And there's so many, from the youth, Mitch, the list goes on and on. We're going to try to whittle it down to 4. I'm going to pick 2. Our guest is going to pick 2. And if it's a Monday, you know what that means, right? That means Matt Guzman with Spurs on Sports Illustrated. It is Mondays with Matt right here. Matt, welcome back.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be back on a Monday.
Yeah, by the way, I think this is the first official audio-only show here at Spurs In Focus, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, by the way, everybody, sorry about that. Due to some scheduling conflicts, myself and Matt couldn't do a video for Monday, but we are here nonetheless. Matt, again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here. But let's dive into it. And there's so many storylines going into this postseason. And the drought's over. I believe Victor, after the game versus Dallas, said the team is ready. He's eager for some high-stake games. Kick us off, Matt. In your list of 2 things, storylines, what's number 1 on your list?
I mean, I think I have to go with the obvious, right? You know, it kind of feels like ever since, you know, at the start of the season, it was a lot of, you know, what is this team going to look like if Victor is healthy, right? Because you head into the year and obviously he's recovering from that blood clot. He's ready to get going. I mean, and he looked great. You know, that first game of the season, he killed the Mavericks, torched them.
Yeah.
You know, and it was this whole thing. And then it was more of, you know, is this going to hold? You know, he deals with the calf strain in late November, and it's like, okay, let's hope this isn't a persistent issue. And then he actually stays really healthy throughout the rest of the year. You know, and so I think it kind of shifted from, you know, what does this team look like with a healthy Victor to, you know, how legit is this team? And then by the time they hit that road trip and, you know, they're the perfect February and they're losing 3 games in 30 attempts, like, you know, at that point it becomes, what is this team capable of?
Right.
And I think that's kind of the biggest thing is just, you know, this is a team that has never been to the playoffs. Victor has never been to the playoffs. Steph Castle has never seen playoff basketball, you know, and so that's, to me, the biggest storyline atop the list is just, you know, will their lack of experience come back to haunt them?
Yeah.
Or, you know, are they already too good? And are they already at a point where, you know, they can handle that physicality, they can handle the added pressure. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I'm going to look for. And I think you'll be able to see it right from game 1, you know, because it doesn't matter who you're playing or where you're playing.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter who you're playing or where.
Yeah.
You know, that intensity is going to be there. And if they can handle it from the jump, I think that they'll be pretty good.
Or as Victor would say, screw it. You know, I think that's the mentality this young team has, is screw it. We don't have any pressure on us to perform because, first of all, they were supposed to be at 62 wins as of this recording. They were not supposed to be number 2 in the West. They were supposed to be middle of the pack team in the West, but here we are. So he's right when Victor says screw it. And you're right, too. That is perhaps the biggest storyline, is the inexperience in the postseason. The core does not have that. You know, you can lean on certain things, though. Steph Castle, you know, national championship, NCAA. Victor Wembanyama in the Olympics, going to the gold medal round, coming up short versus Team USA. Harrison Barnes, obviously, he's won a title. Cornette's won the title. Olynyk's been there, done that. But as far as the core, nothing really when it comes for Keldon, when it comes for Devin. So, and obviously Harper, he's a rookie, duh. But nevertheless, you know, they can lean on certain things, you know, but it doesn't duplicate what they're about to experience later on this week. So that is number one on my list too. I'm with you. I think the inexperience is perhaps the biggest concern slash storyline is will they rise to the challenge? I believe they will. Home court advantage is going to help them in the opening round, and they're humming at the right time. One of my biggest fears, Matt, was were they peaking too soon? That was on the beach where I was watching. I was like, wait, man, are they getting their groove on too soon? But here they are at the end of the season, and they're not. They're still kicking ass, basically. Matt, what's on second on your storyline list?
Yeah, I think something else that I recently wrote about that was kind of interesting to me, at least. It's I wouldn't say it's high on the list of
Mm-hmm.
the top things to look for, but I think it's something that's really interesting, and it's the kind of role that Carter Bryant can play in the playoffs.
Good
You know,
point.
because I really liked. I mean, obviously, what we saw from him in Portland or against Portland with
Yeah.
Victor out. He's kind of shown a lot of things this year between obviously the kind of defensive versatility that he brings, the length that he has, the way he can move quickly. There's been so many things about his game that have made him really promising. And obviously, when they drafted him, they were looking for 3-point shooting and defense. And I think both of
Right.
those things have started to kick up as of late. And, it all kind of came to a head in that Portland game. And Mitch Johnson, as much as I'm sure he hated to have to give it up, he did say he was going to play Carter in the playoffs.
He
He
did, yeah.
did reveal a little bit of his hand there, and I think that's going to be interesting too, because Carter Bryant has grown a lot from the beginning of the season,
Mm-hmm.
and he's not the guy that's going to give you 20 points a night right now, but I mean you can kind of put him in there, and if you can rely on him to be open
Mm-hmm.
to shoot threes confidently, that's a very valuable asset, especially if you can have him in there for defensive possessions as well.
Right. Yeah. Carter Bryant could be a wild card for the Spurs once the postseason begins. Again, we'll get into all the nitty gritty later on this week here at Spurs in Focus. But for right now, again, we're looking at overall generic, big picture things right now. And he's part of that big picture because it goes to the team depth. If they can go as far as Carter Bryant on that rotation, Mitch has the luxury of having perhaps not having such a tight rotation, perhaps a little bit of a middle rotation where he can go further and deeper in the bench, and Carter Bryant is a part of that. Look, he's hitting his stride from the three line. 3 for 3 versus Dallas. Career night. The other night, I think we had 17 points. It was just on fire from the three line. He is basically he's everything that they kind of hoped that Jeremy Sohan would have been. He's it, and he's taking advantage of those minutes, and he's making an impact. He's forcing Mitch Johnson and the coaching staff to say, we have to play this kid. He can play defense. He can hit the three. He's becoming the 3-and-D guy that they've been looking for. So far, so good. Again, but for him, seriously, kind of like a sub storyline for him is I hope he doesn't shrink in the spotlight. That light's going to be bright on San Antonio once they hit the
Right.
postseason. He's a part of that. Hopefully that doesn't bother him. We're talking with Matt Guzman. He's with Spurs on Sports Illustrated. You want to follow my next at Matt GZMAN. Again, apologies for no video for this episode, but Matt and I just couldn't get our schedules together for video. So we figured, hey, you know what? As long as we don't skip a Monday with Matt, we're good to go. All right. So Matt gave you two of his storylines that he's looking forward to. I'm going to give you mine. And the first one is Victor Wembanyama. Will he be an even more dominant force in the postseason? After the game versus Dallas recently, Jason Kidd said, quote, Victor is one, if not the best player in the world. This is his playoff debut. This is his first postseason after missing the playoffs in the first two seasons of his NBA career. He's playing at an all-time level right now. He's MVP caliber level, although it looks like he probably won't walk away with that hardware. But nevertheless, he is the anchor for this team's defense. He is the anchor for this team's offense. The rim protection, scoring, the spacing, the athleticism, everything. He is all that. But how will he perform once it's a high-stakes game, as he mentioned, after the win versus Dallas? I think, Matt, the expectations for him are very high. They are through the roof right now. Can he get even more dominant in the playoffs? How many minutes is he going to play? Are they going to run him more than 30? How much of a nightmare is he going to be for opposing teams. The Spurs are a big title favorite because of him, but we don't know how he'll play once the real season begins, as I like to say. From his workload to the Spurs being cautious with his minutes and his health, we're going to see a ramp up. He's going to get upwards of 30 or more. The playoff physicality, foul trouble, rebounding, when he's on that floor, I think you got to keep an eye on for that. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
Victor has kind of upped his game ever since. I mean, at this point, it's kind of hard to tell
I know, right?
at what time it really took a step forward. But he's proven that. I think it was what it's more about the contrast from the beginning of the season and now.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to those like the early trip to Phoenix. When he really struggled. I think that was when he had single digits offensively. And he was being faced with all these different defensive schemes, and he couldn't figure it out. He's having a little bit of trouble there. But I think as the season has gone on, he's gotten more comfortable in the offense. Obviously, he's just gotten more confident, and he's begun to kind of figure out, okay, I'm seeing this. I've seen this before. Here's how I can combat that. Here's how I can still get to my spots and still affect the game. And so to your point, that is definitely going to be one of the bigger questions is what kind of a force can he be? Just tonight, obviously, Jason Kidd had high praise for him because he scored 40 in 26 minutes, and I think it's one of those things that, you can't truly know how he's going to handle the added pressure and intensity and physicality. You don't know if teams have been kind of saving their hands and waiting to throw different things at him in the postseason. So maybe he does have a little bit of a struggle when he's faced with something really new for the first time. But yeah, I think we asked him about it mid-season, or as this stretch was beginning, and do you think, Victor, that you can become even more dominant? I think he said yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm inclined to believe him, because it seems that this season especially, everything he set his mind to, he's ended up going and just knocking out and passing with flying colors.
Subscribe to Spurs in Focus. Resistance is futile.
Yeah, and the spotlight is going to be on him. He's pretty much, if not already, the face of the NBA. And if he crashes and burns in the first round, second round, all eyes are going to be on him. But at the same time, if he leads this team to at minimum, in my opinion, the Western Conference Finals, I think that bodes well for him and his status as perhaps the guy of the NBA. So, yeah, I think a lot of spotlights are going to be on number one once the real season begins in a few short days. And a second storyline that I'm looking at right now, and it kind of ties into what you were talking about right now with Victor and dealing with the physicality and the foul trouble and whatnot, is the supporting cast. Just how good depth-wise the other players are going to step up should Victor get in foul trouble. Knock on wood, he doesn't get hurt, but if that does happen, how are they going to step up? How will Castle step up in his first postseason debut? What about Devin? What about Keldon? Will Fox be the co-star, as many think that he is, for this team? Will the young guards be a headache for opposing teams? My point is that how will the supporting cast be there to help Victor get W's, and the team obviously get W's? The rebounding, the perimeter shooting, everybody points to the guards, the Spurs. Oh, they can't shoot, although they're making everybody look like idiots right now because they're showing that they can. The second unit consistency is what I'm looking at. And within that talk that I'm doing right now as far as my second storyline is the veterans as well. I know how Barnes has been playing kind of up and down to close the season, but will he be the stable force for this team? I think he will be. The roster is going to get tested, not just of Wemby. How are they going to step up to the plate? So I think it is exciting. Victor looks like he's ready. He said after the Dallas win that he feels the team is ready. But it's a fast rise. hopefully that fast rise for the team doesn't mean a fast fall from their perch. So I'm looking at the supporting cast, Carter Bryant, as you mentioned, De'Aaron Fox especially. And I think of anybody in the supporting cast would have a lot of eyes on would be De'Aaron Fox. I think he's the highest paid player, I believe, or if not the second behind Vassell. The point is he's one of the highest paid players. Is he going to step up in that role and deliver? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be huge because, and it's funny because with so much of the noise that's been on Victor and the 65 games that he's played, it's interesting too because, so much of the focus last couple games and weeks has been on Victor and, is he going to get his awards? Is he the MVP? What is that going to look like? And one of the bigger counter arguments against his MVP case especially was, the fact that he wasn't just dominating offensively.
Mm-hmm.
He's maybe averaging 5 or 6 fewer points than Shea or Jokic. He's not doing nearly as much individually. And that's because he hasn't had to. Like this team has been so good. And, they had high expectations for themselves, right? But I don't even think they knew what they were going to get into this season.
Yeah.
And it's just been because everything is clicking. Castle has taken a leap defensively, which is crazy to say after how good he was last year, but he's just completely made a big difference in so many games. To your point, Fox has seamlessly fit into this offense. And I think, you'd even find a lot of fans who are upset with him not scoring enough.
Yeah.
But that's because he's been able to take a back seat to guys like Dylan Harper who have impacted winning. Julian Champagnie can score 30 points at times, and this team right now is averaging 8 players averaging double figures.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be such a huge piece of how successful they can be in the postseason. I'm with you in that I think I really want to see what it looks like for Fox to take over late game situation, especially in the playoffs. He's the 2023 clutch player of the year. I want to see what that looks like when it matters the most. And I also want to see what Victor does and how he's able to recognize situations where he should shoot the final shot and situations where he can rely on the many weapons around him to go and get a win.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I don't have very minimal doubt that Fox is not going to step up to the plate. Recall everybody, yes, he's been to the playoffs with Sacramento, but it was, I believe, just a one series, and that was it. Was that enough for him to have an idea? Of course, he has probably, his one series with Sacramento is way more than what a majority of these younger players have, obviously. But is that going to be enough? But I'm, looking at Olynyk as well, Bismack, Plumlee, those guys to really be those in the locker room forces when the supporting cast, the younger players, maybe just are getting blinded by the bright lights. Those guys have been there, done that. Hopefully they can be still stabilizing force. And I think those are huge X factors, the veterans, just how much wisdom they're going to impart to the young players, especially the young core, as they're about to step foot into their first playoff series. I mean, I'm excited. As Victor said after the Dallas game, he's excited to play high stakes games. It's going to be great. What about you, Matt? How are you feeling for the Spurs as they're about to get into the playoffs?
I think I've been saying this a little bit to people around me. Like, I think it's become, in my mind at least, increasingly likely that they do win a first round series. I think I put out a tweet the other day asking just people's opinion in general of who they least like to face of the 3 potential opponents, which as of this recording are Phoenix, Portland, and the LA Clippers.
Right.
And I think the consensus was people are a little scared of Phoenix. And I think for good reason they've given the Spurs a lot of trouble, and Victor specifically some trouble. But even with that, even with daunting opponents and having to go on the road for 2 straight games and being, I really do think that this team is learning to gel and learning to play with each other so well that I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think that this is a squad that will be rattled by added pressure and added eyes and added visibility, added media. I really don't think that. I think that they've figured out who they are, and then they are good enough to where they can rely on that and then lean back on that, as opposed to getting scared, or starting to change things when the intensity ramps up.
Yeah. Look, they've had, again, pales in comparison, but they had a taste of that with the the in-season tournament run they had, going all the way to the NBA Cup Finals, losing to New York. It's not the same, I get it, but hey, they can lean on that. They can lean on also the fact that they've beaten some of the big boys in the West, from the Thunder, obviously, beating Denver, beating some of the top teams, the Clippers and whatnot. So they go into this postseason with that type of vibe that, hey, we played these guys already. We've proven we can beat them. We've proven to the league that we can step up to the challenges and win. We've proven to the league and fans and watchers of the game, everything, that never count us out. They proved that over and over this season. They just got to carry that mentality over into the playoffs. And look, shock everybody, they're probably not going to win every playoff game. Oh no, not that, but you just want them to bend, not break. And so far this season, they haven't shown that they can break. They bended, but they haven't been broken. And I like that about this team. He is Matt Guzman with Spurs on Sports Illustrated. Again, due to some time constraints, we're not going to be able to do a nerd segment today, but nevertheless, it'll be back tomorrow, everybody. But Matt, you're ready to go for the playoffs. Coverage on your end is going to start soon. What do you got cooking for us?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm back in town to finish out the regular season and that week of practices in between. But just full playoff coverage, whatever we can do.
Yep.
And I had a great conversation with Victor. I guess I should say everyone in the media room had a great conversation with Victor.
Yeah.
About the 65-game rule now that he's eligible for awards. So that'll be interesting to see where he does fall in all that voting. And, I think this team is something Mitch Johnson was saying they found a good balance of celebrating individual accomplishments and keeping it within the context of their success and kind of leaning on each other. So I think it's, things could not be going better for these guys. And I'm really excited to see how they can fare in their first taste of real basketball.
Yep. And that is just going to happen in just a few short days. It's almost here, everybody, when the real season begins. Once again, he is Matt Guzman with Spurs on Sports Illustrated. Follow him on X at MattGZMAN. Again, it's Monday. We cannot have a Monday without Matt here on Spurs In Focus. He'll likely be back, everybody, shocker, because it's playoff time and it's all hands on deck here at Spurs In Focus. Matt, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us and working with me to schedule in a chat with you this Monday. We appreciate it, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me, of course.
Anytime. Everybody else, we thank you all for making Spurs In Focus your first and only spot for all things San Antonio Spurs. You want to come here only. Don't go to the other places. Come to Spurs In Focus. You can find us on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts. The list goes on Pocket Casts. There's even a YouTube music channel with Spurs In Focus. It is everywhere. Go subscribe right now. Don't forget about the Substack. It is completely free. As I said in the intro, Matt's buying the first 100 subscriptions. So the first 100 people hit subscribe, don't worry about it. Matt's got the bill. That's it. It's easy. So go do that right now. And we appreciate that. Again, the Spurs In Focus on Substack. We'll be back tomorrow because it is playoff time and we are raring to go. So for Mr. Matt Guzman, I am Jeff Garcia. Now you're in focus with Spurs In Focus.